This program is brought to you by DJ's Goalpost Sports Bar and Grill.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pip and Dodds Packers podcast. I'm Tom Pippins, the star of the show, 6'6" from Marquette. John Dodds, our Packers historian, one of the all-time greats. It is a blessing to be back with you via Zoom. We have a special guest to bring in a little while, and we have a special guest to kick off with. Oftentimes, we old retired sportscasters, current sportscasters tend to be prone to overstatement. We use the word great a lot. Well, I think when you talk about the voice of the Green Bay Packers, Wayne Larrivee, you can use that, and it certainly fits, not only because he's one of the great play-by-play announcers in America, but he's a really good man, and we appreciate him very much taking his valuable time to spend a little of it with us. And Wayne, how are you?
Good, Tom. How you doing?
Couldn't be better. It really is super to see you. I appreciate that. I was thinking this morning, JD, that years ago, I remember thinking that Ron Wolf and Brett Favre were connected at the hip. And in some ways, maybe you and Wayne and Larry McCarren are at least connected by a ligament or something with your with your connection up there for Packers broadcast, right?
Oh, I'm a fly on the wall trying to provide a service and a tidbit every now and then. And I tell people you can learn a lot just by listening, because they know it. They've been at the practices, and they're just sit back and listen, and they'll throw you tidbits out, and sometimes they're insider tidbits that they maybe can't do it right away, but it'll come out and you'll learn about it. So I always appreciate working with Wayne.
Yeah. Wayne, you have a wonderful background that perhaps some people don't know. I think I had forgotten, if I knew. I forget a lot of things these days, that you were the voice of the Kansas City Chiefs, as JD was telling us. Maybe take us back before that. You're growing up, I believe, out east?
Yeah, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, right near the New York border in the Berkshire County, which is kind of a vacation destination now, especially on the East Coast. But I grew up in at that time in the 60s, it was, mill country, paper mills. Matter of fact, there were 3 of them in Lee, where I grew up. And, General Electric had a big station in Pittsfield, which was just north of us. So, Berkshire County was thriving in the early to mid 60s. And, the industry changed and things happened in the late 70s and all, but it transformed into what is now a quaint New England vacation area.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. JD, I know you're filled with questions for Wayne.
Sure. Wayne, I've seen you on the golf course. I know you're a pretty good athlete. Did you play sports growing up in high school?
John, I played a little basketball and I ran cross country. I didn't play much golf at all as a kid. I caddied a little bit, but didn't play much golf. But grew up really enjoying sports, and basketball was my favorite sport. And that's the one I always thought I'd grow up broadcasting for the most part. And I got a chance to do it, obviously, for a long time. But football is kind of where I evolved.
You got to be pretty smart to go to Emerson. That much I know, Wayne. And you went there, and you really worked. You honed your craft in the old Boston Garden. That's a sensational story. Please let some of your followers know who might not be able to appreciate part of the reason you have risen to the top.
Well, it's funny because I went to college at Emerson College, as you mentioned, in Boston. And the old Boston Garden, the Celtics and Knicks, and I was, like many of the kids I went to school with, New York sends its kids to Boston for school, okay? So you have a lot of New Yorkers in Boston, and you had the Knicks, of the great Knicks teams of that early to mid-'70s era, and the Cowens, Tom Heinsohn, John Havlicek, Boston Celtics. And so, it was great. What I would do is I found somehow an NBC bag tag, and I had a typewriter, and I put the bag tag on my typewriter, and I put a tape recorder inside the typewriter case, and would go to the Boston Garden and go to this is long before there was much security, but I would go to the back gate where the press went in, and I would dress up. I had a coat and tie on and that type of thing. And the guys would let me in, and I'd go in, and even got into the, press area where they served dinner, and I got the game notes and everything. And then I went upstairs. This is long before there were sky boxes or anything like that. I went up to the old hockey boxes, which were unoccupied during basketball. And I would just sit there and broadcast every Celtics home game I was in town for into my tape recorder and kind of bring it home and review it and listen to it and that type of thing. And eventually I had other people listen to it. And that's kind of how I honed my craft, so to speak.
Oh, what a wonderful story, John, huh?
That's interesting. We had Kevin Harlan on last month, and he said the same, very similar. When he was a ball boy for the Packers, he would go up to the press box, and Lee Remmel would let him in, and he'd do a mock play-by-play from the radio booth when he was 12, 13 years old. So that's interesting. Who was who did you like to listen to as a broadcaster? Were you a Johnny Most guy, or who was the guy you liked to listen to? Ray Scott, or?
No, I was a New York guy. So Marv was the voice of the Knicks and Rangers, and later the Giants. He was a big influence on me. As for baseball, I loved Phil Rizzuto because I'm a big Yankees fan, and who didn't like Phil Rizzuto if you were a Yankees fan? So that was fun. It was great. I listened to some great broadcasters. Here's the interesting thing. Cable TV was coming online along with color TV back in the early 60s, early to mid 60s. And so it was a big deal. It was like, a few years ago, HD TV, remember when that came on and everyone had to have an HD TV and whatever. But this was cable. And so my grandfather said to my dad, he said, if you put in cable, I'll buy you a color TV. And so my father did, and my grandfather bought the color TV. And then Grandpa would come up every day, every Thursday through Sunday, and watch the Yankees at our house on color TV. And that's kind of how I became a Yankees fan. But, that was a big deal back then. And our cable was all New York related because we were far western Massachusetts. We were a stone's throw from the New York line. Matter of fact, when we were kids, we used to go drinking in New York because it was legal there and it wasn't in Massachusetts. So state line and drink legally back then in high school.
Well, wait, I'm saying to myself, HD TV is the reason they booted me out of television. I said, where in the world was that like 30 years ago, But be that as it may, it's a wonderful story. I remember growing up in Syracuse, New York, you had two channels. And you just get up and you change the channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When did you know that this is what you wanted to do? I mean, you've been blessed with that golden throat. Did you come out of mother's womb with a microphone, or did it take a few years and listening to your favorite teams and announcers?
Yeah, that's kind of the evolution. I originally thought I'd be a high school teacher. And then I saw what they were doing to teachers in high school. I said, well, I don't think I can take that. So, obviously I had a tremendous interest in sports and loved to follow it. And that's when the Knicks kind of caught fire. And I was a big Yankees fan and listening to those guys. Bill White and Frank Messer were the announcers along with Phil Rizzuto. They were very good. Lindsey was the Mets announcer. He was tremendous. So I started, and then Marv Albert with the Knicks. When I started to catch on in high school with the Knicks, Bill Bradley was the guy I patterned my game after. And so those are the things that influence you as a kid. And then you start, building from there. And I just thought Marv Albert had a great flair for radio. He had a great call. The inflection of his voice could tell you as much as the words he was using. And so, I really, that's where I really started to get interested in this business when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was interesting. When I grew up in Milwaukee, my dad bought me the book, Bill Bradley's book, A Sense of Where You Are, which was his autobiography. And those Knicks teams, they meant a lot between Clyde Frasier and DeBusschere and Willis Reed. That was an exceptional team, and Phil Jackson was on that team. So that's an exceptional team.
Yeah, and years later, I was able to kind of connect with that team by getting to know Phil Jackson with the Bulls. And, I remember the stories, and I remember how he tried to create in Chicago that kind of team feeling, that kind of sense of the way to play the game. It was rooted in Red Holtzman, And the personification in the modern era became what Tex Winter wanted with the triangle offense, where everybody touched the ball at almost every possession. Michael Jordan, that was not what he wanted to do. That was, kind of against who Jordan was. He was a guy who wanted the ball in his hands, and he was going to control the action. Whereas what Phil was looking for was a move the ball. Everybody's involved. The team eventually will get the ball to Jordan. But, that kind of thing, everyone has a hand in the fate of what happened on the floor, much like those Knicks teams. And by the way, you mentioned those Knicks teams: Bradley, DeBusschere, Earl Monroe, Willis Reed, all are in the Basketball Hall of Fame. All of them started that team. And that's amazing when you think about it. So Phil tried to recreate that in Chicago, and I thought he did a great job of that once he convinced Michael to share the ball a little bit.
Dollar Bill Bradley and dollar Wayne Larrivee. He is the voice of the Green Bay Packers and many other responsibilities. We are really enjoying getting to know him and his career on a different level here on the Pip Dodds Packers podcast. Just take a quick time out and then we'll resume here. Thanks for being with us.